Thank you, everybody. The wonderful thing about World Cafe is it begins to create a community conversation. So all of us have come in with our little parts, and we've started the weaving together. So we're making a community out of the things that we're interested in. And perhaps that's given you some ideas or indicated some people you want to talk more with. And of course, when you're doing a World Cafe, you can ask people, how has your view of this moved in the time of our conversation? And actually, the linking of people is fascinating, because if you sit at a table and then you kind of, it's like you have a backpack and you carry people with you to the next conversation, pretty soon, in fact, everybody gets linked through association in the conversation, which is pretty cool. Not often happens in an even real-life community. So working in the power of community is really interesting, and I know there's some of you, we're just having chat, some groups who have come together. This is an opportunity for you to say, how could we use this stuff in the work that we do, and how can we become a field that can host a field? If you've come to something alone, there's very little power in it when you go back out. So the warning, of course, is that there is English, there's other languages, and then there's art of hosting. Art of hosting is not English. It is something, any group that gets together for long enough has its own language. That's the interesting thing. And art of hosting has its own language. You'll notice two of those words we've used a lot already today, hosting and harvesting. People ask us, what's the difference between a host and a facilitator? And I have a friend who used to say, when people come to you for dinner, do you facilitate them? Which is a pretty clear distinction, right? What you're trying to do is create an opportunity where people can meet well together and maybe even get sparked to be more of who they are than before. So the hosting role, often I've been a facilitator since 1995. Don't add up the years, that's kind of a long time. And I know that often I got hired by clients to get a certain objective achieved. Please help us do our strategic plan. Please help people get on board with this change. So oftentimes I felt like I'm forcing the group somewhere. And working with people, I would realize that's actually not where they wanted to go, and that wasn't what was needed. But I was hired to do this. But my natural tendency is to go and create the container for emergence. That's what a host does. Sometimes in a very brief way, and apologies for the bluntness of this, sometimes training is trying to get something in. Facilitating is trying to get something out. And hosting is holding the container for emergence. What do we mean by container? Well, people drink tea around this place. No, if you're in Sweden, you drink coffee, excuse me. And some people drink tea out of a saucer, interestingly enough. But if you put it in a cup, and you go across the floor with a cup and you trip, there's more opportunity that a tea will stay in a cup than a saucer, right? But if you put it in a teapot, there's even more opportunity that the tea will stay in the pot even if you trip on something. So a good container helps us stay together even when there's turbulence. So it's not that we want the art of hosting tea sets, oh no, but that we talk about containers. What is the simple and elegant way for people to stay together and do good work, even when there's turbulence, even when there's challenge, even when there's conflict? And as you might notice, we're not that diverse of a group. We could be much more diverse than we are. But it's good to come together anyway and practice, so those places where we get challenged, we can help people to stay together for long enough to get good work done. So people often have come to Art of Hosting say, I want some methods, I want some tools. And we kind of go, oh yes, welcome to the Art of Hosting, you want tools. We're a practice. So we are a practice field. What I want to introduce to you now, or I want to introduce to you, is the practice that's underneath and the foundation for Art of Hosting. It is called the fourfold practice. It is called the fourfold practice because there are four folds of this practice, and it is a holon, meaning each fold incorporates and goes further than the one before it. So unfortunately, because we are low-tech, we cannot do this as a 3D wonderful thing, but if I were to make this as a 3D wonderful thing, I would be making a spiral going up like this, where people get finer and more refined on each of these practices. So I want to introduce you to this quite briefly today, and then take it more deeply tomorrow morning in our check-in. So, the first practice in the fourfold practice is called Host Yourself. Michael's going to walk around with the host yourself banner for a moment. The question here is, what do I need to do so that I can stay as present as possible in the moment? And everybody has personal practices. Some people like to have a good night's sleep. Some people like yoga. Some people do meditation. Some people have martial arts practice. What is it that you do in that moment of turbulence to keep yourself grounded and present so that you can be curious and so that you can be helpful? The Buddhists talk about getting unseated. You know, somebody can I don't know. The world has the way of supplying the opportunity. So can you stay present, or does your attention immediately go over there and try doing something rather than staying here? So we want to confront you with your own freedom to choose to host yourself in any moment. And we as a hosting team will say, do you need to host yourself now? Meaning, is it better for you to leave the room for a moment because you're becoming overwhelmed? Do you need air? Do you need a drink of water? Do you need to go and I'm going to become Ika's student because he can do Qigong napping. I don't know anything about Qigong napping, but I'm incredibly attracted by it. Power napping. It sounds like power napping with a nice name. Yeah. So I could become a student of that because to be rested means you can be more in the moment. So this is the question. What is your practice? What is your practice around hosting yourself? And this particular training can act like a water slide. In other words, woo, everything's happening. Come out on Sunday. What was that? If you happen to be more introverted type of person, it can feel overwhelming, all this stuff we're going to do. So maybe you want to turn to somebody and say, would you please take some notes for me, and I need to go outside for 10 minutes and stand there and look at the water, because that's what I need now to do in order to be present. So please give yourself the freedom to host yourself and to invite other people to do too, and I have some interesting personal stories about that one. The second fold. By the way, people who are really used to being in charge sometimes find it very difficult to host themselves. People who like to be of service can find it very difficult to host themselves. If this is you, just go, yeah, okay, I know that. And think about, let me be in consideration about what I do about it. Fold number 2. It's called be hosted. Be a good participant. Be in the process. So I don't know if you noticed the hosting team, that many of us stood up this morning, or right after lunch when we said hello to you. But some of us were hosting. We were standing up and hosting the process. Some of us were in the process. Oftentimes, if you do a lot of work with other people, you're always on something, but you're never in something. Maybe you're around something, but you're never really in it. And especially if you're a leader, it's really good to be in the conversation. To be in that with other people, to ask other people, what do you think, for once? So we often talk about hosting from the chair. You don't have to be the person standing up in order to do good hosting. You can host where you sit by asking other people, what do you think? What's your opinion? I haven't heard from you yet. You drew this on the paper for World Cafe. What does it mean to you? So the only way I can be a good host or be well as a participant is if I've learned to host myself. Because if I can host myself, I can listen to somebody else first. They don't have to listen to me first. I don't know if you've noticed, but people are getting louder in the world. They're yelling more, and they're repeating themselves. That's because nobody's listening. So what happens if you offer listening? If you are a good participant? If you give your goodwill to the person who's hosting, even if they seem to be having a bit of a challenge doing it. Sometimes for me this is really difficult because I have that little thing in my head going, if you just give me the process, it would be a good one. So it's kind of like, could I cut the other person some slack? Could I support them in what they're doing? Could I really be supportive from my seat to see how that changes what's going on in the room? So the movement from this first to the second one is the deciding to be a learner. This is a wonderful relief to be a learner in life. I actually think the whole human system is set up to be a learner. We love learning. We love it more than anything else. And then about by 5 years old, we're like, I don't want to learn anymore, it's so bad. But we actually love learning. It's what our system is designed to do. So how can we be in joyful learning together? It's actually a very interesting question. So when we move from this fold, number 2, be a participant, to the next one, we become a community of learners. So one thing we'd like to be in this time together is a community of learners. I'd love to be here with you like that. Fold number 3. Host and harvest conversations that matter. So what conversation out there has your name on it? What's the one that absolutely I have a friend who used to say, I thought somebody should do something until I realized my name is somebody. Like, is there something you absolutely are called to do or you uniquely do? Like, here's Navid, he hosted Sweden 3.0. You know, what is the next level of our country? Amazing conversation. Hopefully. I'm going to come to you and ask you, would you tell that story? So I'm just warning you right now. So, host and harvest conversations that matter. And this is a good time to be in practice with somebody else. Don't do this alone. You have much more capacity if you're hosting and harvesting with somebody else, to find patterns, to be able to stay present, to sense what's in the group, to support people doing something. So it's a good time. I have a friend who lives in Columbus who says, do not leave an art of hosting training if you haven't found a mate. Make sure you find somebody who's a mate here, somebody new who can be a mate to you. So even if they can't be in the room with you, they could be at your back supporting you. So when we do this, when we host and harvest conversations that matter, and we're moving into the next phase, we become a community that learns. So suddenly we've upped our game from being individual learners to collective intelligence and collective wisdom. Interesting shift. And this fourth one, the fourth petal of this practice, is called CoCreate. So be in a community of practice. Be actively practicing with other people to refine your game, to practice and polish what you do, to become better and more refined at what you do. Sometimes being part of a community of practice can be very interesting. I say I love learning, not necessarily in the moment when it happens, because it can be like, ouch! Thank you for telling me about that part of myself I don't like very much. It's like being in the rock polisher. But that's, of course, how diamonds get made. You know, a diamond is merely a piece of coal that withstood the pressure for long enough, and then got some sculpting so that it could hold the light. And we help each other to refine in the way we can learn to work together. So, of course, by the time we get to this point, we are taking what we learned in a community of practice and integrating it back into hosting myself and going around that spiral again. So there are our 4 practices. And the question is, do you have a practice? If you want to be a practitioner, you need to stay in practice. At the center of all of this, for us, the mastery component, I guess, or the central practice, we talk about 2 capacities, sensei and steward. These are kind of weird words for people. The sensei is the master practitioner in the dojo, in a martial arts dojo. He, usually, sometimes she, is responsible for the students in the dojo really doing their practice, becoming Aikido practitioners and black belts, becoming karate people, becoming jiu-jitsu people, whoever they are. So the sensei for us stands for staying in fierce practice. Practicing so much that it becomes second nature to you what you do. You might call that the grandfather energy. Grandfather's saying, stick with it, keep going, try it again. Oh, fell down, try it again, right? The stewarding energy might be called the grandmother energy. This word steward comes from the Scottish clan system. The steward was the person responsible for allocating resources across the clan so that everybody had the resources they need. And that's the same capacity we talk about here at the center. How do I hold space for the new and the fresh and the learning? So it's that wonderful you know how good grandmother energy is, I love you, you're wonderful, get on with it. So these 2 dance together, this is like a yin-yang. This here between them is the pathway of practice. So really refining the art so that at the center we are in fierce practice and we're nurturing the new and making space for learning and for relationship and each other. Maybe a little story.
Yes. While I put these in the whole room, I want to tell you a bit of my story with this fourfold practice. So first of all, I realized the most important for me was host yourself. And that has two backgrounds. First of all, I started with hosting when I was about 16, when I went into the holiday camp, where I went into almost every year as a supervisor for the kids, looking after the kids for 2 or 4 weeks. And I realized sometimes it was really hard, sometimes it was really not working. And I was wondering, I was really frustrated. Why does it not work? Why are the kids so stupid? I asked myself. Until I realized, oh, it's not the kids, it's me. And then I started, and then I look at this quote over there. The success of an intervention depends on the interior condition of the intervener. And that's also about the same. I think I realized it earlier, but when I came in contact with this out of hosting practice, the fourfold practice, and host yourself, be present, then I realized, oh yeah, I have to work on that. Another reason why this is important for me is because I'm not sure if I'm introvert or extrovert, but my body is highly sensitive, and I really have to take care of it like a little baby. So I have to take care. How are you feeling? Are you tired right now? Are you hungry? Are you information overloaded? What do I actually need right in this moment to be present? Am I like full until here? And I have to step out. And that is like continuous practice over the last years, being present in the moment, trying my best, trying my 8 hours, getting my 8 hours of sleep, getting the food that my body wants to be nourished with, and all that stuff. So it's a continuous practice, and I'm practicing since I know that. I practice even more conscious. And how that can look like we can discuss later in the village news and also in the personal practice and the morning practice. Another thing that is came quite naturally to me was this one, host and harvest conversations, and not especially the harvest one, but especially the hosting, because I had to take care of the kids. So I had to be funny in that moment, because otherwise they would just run away. So I was pushed and I was forced to get to know it and to learn it. And as I realized, the better I hosted myself, the better my capacity rose to host other people as well. So if I'm present with myself, I can host other people as well. What then is like a really magical experience for me is this one. Co-creation and co-create with others is an amazing feeling. And the recent example that I had go here. Sorry. The best example that I had, or the most recent example, was when we designed this training. Because there is this really nice metaphor that Tracy and Mary Alice always named, and that's a beehive metaphor that we also had in between, where we became a self-organizing and self-learning system. So everyone did something, and it was like buzzing around, like you could feel like everyone was doing something. And this training, like the setup that we have so far, I think it became like that in the last 2 hours before the training, because everyone stepped up, everyone took something, everyone took a chair, everyone did anything, and in the end it looked beautifully. So it's this feeling of in the flow. It's great. And now comes my what always is a bit of a challenge, especially when I'm acting as a host or when I'm facilitating, and that is be hosted. Because there is this little, as Mary Alice said, this little judgmental voice in my head that always says, look, you could do this a little bit more better, or you could do this a bit different. Especially, when I think that I know a bit about it, then I always see what could be done better. And it's not helping anyone in that moment. But it's about stepping back from the judgment and yeah, really stepping back from the judgment and staying curious. I think that's the most important for me. Staying curious for whatever might come. Even if you had this conversation about, okay, what is important for you in the world? Even if I had this conversation on and on and on and on again, but it's to stay curious and not stop learning, because if I'm stuck and I judge, then I stop learning as well. And we want to stay learning. So, yeah, I think that's the important thing about it.
In your little booklet, you have a double-page spread about fourfold practice that asks you some questions. But here are some to consider around each of the folds for the host yourself. This question, what is the state of my being in my presence? Along the lines of this quote, the success of an intervention depends on the interior condition of the intervener. That's from Bill O'Brien and often quoted by Otto Scharmer. This one about be hosted, the question, where am I in? Where are you in? Where are you part of the conversation? Not just around it or observing it, but where are you really in? For the host and harvest conversations that matter, this really cool question, what is mine to do? So of all the expectations and obligations and everything that people have for you and you have about yourself, what is truly yours to do? Is an interesting question here about hosting and harvesting, conversations that matter. And the final question here, who and where is my community? Where do I practice? So once you leave here, we're a community of practice during the time we're together, but once you leave here, where are you going to practice? Where's your community? So we want to invite you for the next 7.25 minutes to turn to somebody next to you. Just reflect on the fourfold practice. What has really sparked you? Yes?
Let's go over that, where am I in again?
Yeah, so this is, when we say be hosted, this is be in the conversation.
So am I in the...
Yeah, where are you participating?
Ah,
Where are you really one of the people who is participating? In the conversation. Committed with other people. Rather than around or on or underneath or behind or even. So when you turn to somebody next, you just reflect, what stood out for you from the fourfold practice? Where is that kind of sweet spot for you? Where is the place you're going, I haven't been there that often, as Ika said, be hosted is harder, I have to remain curious. So what's been sparked for you listening to the fourfold practice?